choose between Iris and the board.
Do we want to come out of executive session and then we can start?
Which is Mark, a border collie or an Irish?
No. That was
Is that an analogy?
That was my choice.
Okay.
I choose between Iris and.
Oh, that's what you did.
But,
That looks
Okay,
like a Beatles.
we
like,
are live.
album cover. I see like John Lennon in there, Jesus. I'm live. Oh God.
We're live.
I'd like to call the Board of Education back to order and reconvene our regular board meeting for 7 o'clock. We have item 4.
Sorry, we have to exit executive session.
I have a motion to exit executive session.
So moved.
second,
Roll call.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. So where I was at was reconvening that meeting at 7 o'clock, which we already are. Item 4, President's announcements. I want to make sure that I acknowledge the hard work of our parents in this challenging time. And we're very thankful for your partnership, especially in this month of December. Thank you for your hard work. We, as a board, recognize that this has been challenging on you. Not only on your children, but you as well. And I want to acknowledge and thank you. Our teachers who've really stepped up and kept up the quality of our education, especially in the month of December. Thank you again for your hard work. And that's my announcement, unless any other board member needs to say anything. Item 5, board member committee reports. So we have the Financial Liaison Committee, Audit Committee.
Nothing to report on that.
Yep. Permanent Improvement Committee,
Nothing to report on that.
Board Policy Committee,
We're good.
we're good. And Sustainability Committee is on hold in this current situation. Let me scroll down. District Committee reports. We have Transportation Appeals Committee.
None.
We have the Cuyahoga Valley Career Center report. Mr. Gilbride is not here this time.
If you
There's-
see,
Oh, there's a.
there's a couple of attachments
Okay,
that I
can you-
brought. Did Jim?
Yeah, just a student highlight, one of our Brecksville Broadview Heights high school students highlighted, they highlight students each month. So if any of our families would like to read about the wonderful things that our students are doing at CVCC, they can look at those attachments in the agenda.
And I've been hearing so many wonderful things that have been happening there. And they've continued that level of education we've all appreciated. District reports, we have safety and security meeting report,
No updates.
school foundation report,
Nothing at this time.
PSO report.
Just one thing, it's already happened. Stuff the Sleigh was a huge success. They gathered over $600 in cash donations for Yuletide hunger and 2 SUVs full of donations for Lori's home city mission. Mr. Raines was a great Santa. He handed out bags to donors, bags of little goodies. Thank you to the Kiwanis of Brecksville for donating the sleigh, the stuff, as well as paying for the treat bags. Over 70 cars came through during the 2-hour window. The middle school PSO would love to do this district-wide next year. Thanks and happy holidays from the middle school PSO.
It's awesome. Okay. Item 7, we
I'm
have
sorry, I just had one thing for Kappa really quickly. So this evening they are hosting among several of their programs that they support and drive throughout the year. Tonight they're hosting via Zoom a health and wellness series with an individual by the name of Javier Sanchez, learning to live above the circumstances. And ultimately the goal there is to continue to have and drive conversations around the ability to adapt and manage change. So I think a great message given light of everything we're living through.
Okay, any other board member reports? Item 7, community communications, A, hearing of the public. Mr. Yanaglas, you have a hearty reading for us.
That I do.
But hearing from the public is absolutely essential to our duties.
Okay, so this evening we have 33 public comments. Our first one is from Patrick Martelon. I would encourage the board, school administrators, teachers, and parents to visit the Great Barrington Declaration for a scientific presentation of the facts about how deadly or not deadly COVID-19 is, who is at risk, and how deadly lockdowns have been, and recommendations for a shift in public policy. For quite some time, we have been in favor of a return to full-time in-person learning. It is abundantly clear that children are not being substantially affected by the virus with less impact than normal seasonal flu. They are not significant vectors for spread of the virus. Most healthy adults under the age of 70 are not at significant risk from the virus. The institution of the public school is being destroyed. We will be strongly considering alternative education options if the district cannot provide full-time in-person instruction in the new year. School vouchers appear to be something that we need desperately. I do not understand the need for those who want to be in a hybrid or virtual model to advocate for restricting full-time in-person instruction. We've tried very hard to be respectful in our communication with the board, but it is increasing difficulty to do so. I think that we all understand this is a difficult situation, but the attitude of some that know it all is troubling. The constant invocation of science with no actual data or presentation of facts or scientific study is frustrating. The county heat map and numbers of new cases are irrelevant when children are not being affected. I could pick apart the farce that is the school's policies on social distancing and mask wearing. They are not keeps kids from getting or spreading the virus, but I want to see a return to full-time in-person instruction, so I won't call much attention to that farce. It is time to return to normal and stop the damage being done to our children's education and overall well-being with these lockdowns. Be courageous and lead by giving the community a real choice of full-time in-person instruction and virtual. Those parents that want virtual can choose that option, or should I say continue to be able to make that choice they've had from day one. Those of us that do not want that choice have had little to no other choice. Again, I would encourage the board, school administrators, teachers, and parents to visit the Great Barrington Declaration. Number 2 is from Caroline Toth. Can we please allow our elementary students to return to school, even at least for hybrid? If parents are willing to send them, why is the district not allowing them to go? There has to be a better way. Melanie Kieran, number 3. I am once again asking that my children receive their education. When does this all end? What is the criteria that makes grown-ups comfortable? What is the criteria you will use to say our kids' education outweighs the comfort of others? What is the criteria you will use when you face the reality that isolation is literally killing children, virtual education is not equitable, and teachers are the point of instruction, not a video screen? I have provided countless points of data. We have our own local data which supports a return to school. The CDC recommends in-school instruction. So what exactly is it that elevates the need of some over the fundamental role of this district? Serve its families and children. Educators love to talk about using data to drive instruction, yet for nearly a year, we haven't done that. First, we aren't collecting all the data. We aren't collecting missed instructional hours for internet connection failures, power outages, and the what I didn't hear that, or your screen is frozen encounters. Teachers in this district are marking students present in virtual classes even when the students are not there because of internet connections. I know this to be true. Missed hours of instruction. Second, there's a lack of transparent reporting of the data. How many failures were issued in the first quarter? Why weren't elementary children given report cards? Why are normally AB kids now getting Cs? Where are teachers in their pacing guides now versus a year ago? The return to in-school instruction and associated social activities is actually not a bold decision to make. The data supports this. Local public schools are doing it and have been doing it. Private schools are doing it and have been doing it. Some of the kids in our own district are doing it. Lastly, I have been teaching in a 100% virtual model for nearly a year. Our kids been doing it for a few weeks. I can say with confidence, this is unsustainable, devastating, and is completely unavoidable. I'd really like it when the school bus goes down my street again. That not just a select few or the private school kids are on it, but that my kids will get on it too. Thank you for your time. Marissa, my children need to be back in class. Their emotional well-being has taken a deep dive. Academically, they have fallen behind. What will it take to open the schools? Number 5, Lori Guggenbiller. 1, why is BBH not keeping track of missed instructional hours and reasons for missed instructional hours? 2, why doesn't BBH have a consistent protocol across the school buildings in regards to teachers' presence in the school for instruction and the amount of live instruction that needs to be provided? Example, the high school teachers do not have to be in the building every day. Max required is 1, and the middle school is required to be in the building every day. What is the requirement by building for live instruction? Number 6 from Kelly. Last spring, my child was a 4th grader, and we were told repeatedly that they only had 1.5 to 2 hours per day of schoolwork to do because more time in front of the computer was not age appropriate. Why, only 6 months later, is it now acceptable for her to sit for 7 hours a day in front of that same computer? Some days more if there's more ready to do. My daughter is lumped into the doing okay with the masses because she made 5th grade honor roll first quarter and was always on time to her Zooms. What you fail to recognize is that she's not okay. She has been late to Zooms 3 times in the last week and doesn't care anymore. A stress and anxiety related eye tic that she's developed in the 3rd grade is back, and she now has to take melatonin to sleep at night. Virtual school, isolation, and excessive screen time are more destructive to her mental and physical health than the virus ever will be. My child is not okay. None of our kids are okay. Number 7 from Michelle Toth. Please consider continuing remote learning as the case numbers and positivity rates are high and will continue to be high after the holidays and break through the new year. Our kids have been remote since March and doing great, socially and academically. They are learning new life skills and self-discipline and time management. We can do this for the health of our community. Number 8 from Nathan. The semester ends 2 weeks following the end of winter break on January 4th. By remaining in 5-day remote learning for just 2 more weeks, this will give extra time for the dust to settle after the holiday season to be sure there is not another spike in holiday-related cases, and to identify the individuals that may be positive, symptomatic, or not. In the grand scheme of things, 2 more weeks will not make a difference in the student's education, but it could make a huge difference in the safety and preventing another spike or outbreak. The school board must ask itself, what is more disruptive to their learning and the faculty's preparations? Returning to school in person only to be sent back to remote learning in just a matter of days, or remaining in the current remote plan until at least the end of the semester. While not ideal, everyone has adjusted to remote learning, and it really does not make sense to change within just 2 weeks left in the semester. Please keep the health of our children, teachers, faculty, and community members in mind, and do not make a blind or ignorant decision to return to in-person learning until time has passed following the winter break. I know my family is committed to not traveling and celebrating as a independent family unit this year because it is the right thing to do. Regretfully, I know there are community members that will make different choices that only create a situation of risk for the rest of us. Number 9, Dr. Catherine Solly. I believe that the schools should remain remote until the beginning of the 2nd semester. This will provide an appropriate time frame for students and staff to self-quarantine after the holiday break, reducing the risk of transmitting and contracting COVID. It is our duty to protect those around us, our family, friends, and teachers. Once the 2nd semester begins, we should follow CDC and health guidelines, and if cases are high, remain in hybrid, at least for the high school, until the cases decline. Number 10, Nicola Foley. In-person school should not reconvene until the end of the semester. If the school COVID positive numbers have displayed anything over the first half of the year, it's that you can't trust people, BBH families, to do the right and safe thing. The 2nd semester should also be hybrid or remote. I can't even imagine how high the numbers would have been if school was in session 5 days in person. Let's make it the district's New Year's resolution to listen to scientists and health experts and follow their recommendations. Number 11, Lauren Piscitello. Sorry if I pronounce these wrong. The kids need to be in school. BBHCSD is doing an amazing job keeping the kids safe. Private schools are managing through the pandemic, so can we. Online learning is no way for K4 should learn. Thank you. Number 12, Kathy Durbin. Please consider staying remote until the end of the second quarter. Christmas gatherings will lead to more exposure and spreading, and a return to school will put everyone at increased risk and increase the spread. Please allow enough time after Christmas and New Year's to allow a quarantine period for those that did not avoid gatherings at that time. Our teachers and student safety should be your number one priority. Number 13, Martina Jagers. Please prioritize health and safety by remaining in a remote learning model through the end of the quarter at a minimum to mitigate potential spread due to holiday gatherings. 14, Jackie Barnum. Why has moving the elementary school students to the high school while the older kids stay remote never been discussed? It will be next to impossible to social distance in the elementary buildings, and I think that more space will make everyone feel safe. This has already been proved to work effectively at other districts in the area. Thank you for your time and efforts. 15, Michelle Hassman. I feel we should follow the state's recommendations to stay remote until second semester. Cases have gone down in schools because we are remote. Too many people are going about their lives like there's nothing wrong. It would be in our best interest as a community to consider people will be gathering at Christmas and New Year's and quarantine the first 2 weeks into January. Let's start off the year right. As parents, we need to step up and help our teachers and get through this together. 16 is from Tracy. In your discussions of the learning plan for the remainder of the school year, I hope you will continue to keep online learning as an option and make it an actual priority at the schools, not just the backup plan for the families that are scared. Quote, scared, your words, not mine. This is a very real health crisis and one that is affecting our kids and teachers at an alarming rate. This needs to be a viable option for families to make any other plans you have work. Our teachers and principals are doing a phenomenal job with little to no support from the board or the administration. Provide them with support and planning time to implement effectively. These Thursday, Friday change of plans has to stop. And for those families wanting in person, a 2-week quarantine through the end of the grading period post holidays just makes common sense. Anything else is simply dangerous. I know you care about our kids and kids' mental health. Please care about their physical safety and the health of teachers and staff as well. 17, Michelle. Why are the students still responsible for taking state mandated tests when our schools are not responsible for providing the minimum state mandated instruction hours? It has come to my attention that our district has not been logging instructional hours and in some cases marking a student present when they are missing class. 18, Joel Kreitz. I have 3 children in the school system, 7th, 9th, and 12th. Remote learning is an insufficient substitute for their learning needs. The risk of getting sick is far outweighed by the effects of isolation I'm witnessing them suffer from. On top of the amount of academic struggle from incomplete instruction and stress as a result, I've never seen my kids struggle as much as they have now. Your choice to keep them home is having detrimental and I fear irreversible consequences. 19, Denise Golick. Thank you all for your hard work during this difficult year. As we look forward to 2021, I encourage the board to decide to return to school in the remote model for 2 weeks to account for the anticipated increase in cases after the holiday. However, I do not want to see sports or extracurriculars pause during this time. These students, especially the athletes, are unlikely to leave the area as they have required practice over the break. And if they miss practice, they cannot compete. Also, ceasing activities in January essentially negates all of the hard work they have done up until this point and effectively ruins their entire season. Again, BBH has been very successfully conducting its sports programs during this time period, and there is no reason to stop now. Looking forward from here, I support a return to in-school instruction as soon as our BBH community data demonstrates that COVID is on the decline, but that decision should be made at a later date in January. Number 20, Roger Bundy. We adults are utterly failing our children, but the emperor has no clothes. Our education response to COVID-19 has exposed an ugly truth about our public education system, and in particular, the Brecksville-Broadview Heights Community School District. The entire system is structured to first serve and protect the adults working in it, not the children and the students it exists to educate and nurture. Blame is pointless and counterproductive, and there is plenty to go around. Yet this is a fact that each of us must accept and take responsibility for if we are honest with ourselves. For my part, as a parent of district children and tax-paying residents, the only real power I have in this system is to vote with my feet and my wallet. The district will get no more support from me at the ballot box or anywhere until and unless the adults with the real power in the system, the board, administrators, teachers, and staff, start putting the welfare of the students they serve before their own interests. The response of the adults with real power in the system thus far can only be charitably described as acts akin to self-immolation. It is both stunning and heartbreaking to be forced to watch it unfold from the sidelines. We can bid a sad farewell to our heritage. Number 21, Frank Datchler. The kids need to go back in full-time school and stop letting the teachers union and the Board of Education make the decisions on their behalf. 22, Lisa Galick. I ask that you please extend the period of remote learning to the end of the first semester on January 14th for the following reasons. Experts predict the COVID-19 cases will continue to increase after the holidays as people travel to visit friends and family and gather in groups. A 2-week quarantine period of remote learning after winter break will keep those with symptoms isolated with the rest of the school community. COVID-19 is increasing in our local community and not decreasing. For the week of December 5th, over 25% of tests in Cuyahoga County came back positive. In the Brecksville-Broadview Heights community, just over 4% of the people have been diagnosed with COVID since March. That's 1 out of every 24 people you meet. We have 3 children, and remote learning has been a success for them. It has allowed our daughters to benefit from school 5 days a week and to learn many independent skills. I'm grateful for our teachers for creating such a robust and accessible remote program. I believe we will be turning a corner in the new year. Vaccines are coming. We will be past the holidays and into warmer weather soon. We are very near the end, but this pandemic is not over. Please do the right thing and continue to prioritize the health and safety of our students, staff, and families. 23. Sorry, I need the break.
No, you need to keep going.
She looked at me. Nezzy Gibbons, please consider continuing remote learning through this semester and then reevaluate opening based on COVID numbers. Many families will be getting together over the holidays, which will most likely cause an increase in cases. Please consider the safety of our staff and students. Thank you. Jennifer Steffen, our students are suffering academically and emotionally every time a Zoom call drops in the middle of a class or the Wi-Fi isn't working, or kids are so far behind that we need to cancel school just so everyone can get caught up. A piece of our children's well-being is chipped away. Data from all over the world show that it is safe to open schools. Teachers are at no greater risk from COVID by being in school buildings than by being in the general community. More importantly, students are put at much greater risk by being forced into isolation than they are from this virus. It is time to put our children first. It is time to reopen our schools. Melanie Hauer, please do everything you can to increase in-person instruction for our students. Their education and mental health are suffering greatly. Nearby Revere School District has successfully managed full in-person instruction this entire school year. Please provide a detailed explanation as to why this is possible for Revere but not for Brecksville-Broadview Heights. Something is very wrong with the system given the educational opportunities here and at Revere are so drastically different. The barriers in our district need to be identified, communicated, and torn down. Thank you for taking the time to review my comments. 26, David Hauer. Why is Revere in school 5 days a week and we cannot manage 2 days in a row? My family and I will be watching closely this evening, and I pledge to actively work against any board member or administrator who votes to continue the charade that is our current situation if we remain in the virtual environment. I will no longer remain quiet and will be calling and emailing every single day. 27, Margaret Stumfel. I respectfully request that the board address the question, why is the front of the new school not going to include a sidewalk on Oaks Road? The reason given is that it is a cost savings measure. Please explain why this is short-sighted and why it does not set a bad precedent for the future of sidewalks on Oaks Road. Costing almost $50 million, I would hope the new school would be a flagship for safer routes to school and not a throwback to outdated thinking. I appreciate your consideration in this matter, as sidewalks are an important issue for many taxpayers in the community of Broadview Heights and Brecksville. Sean Galick, thank you for choosing remote learning for the last few weeks. Our kids have been safe, and that's my main concern. Going forward in the rest of the school year, can you please continue either remote or hybrid learning until this pandemic is more under control? Please put the safety of our teachers and children first. 29 from Allison Zanuski. I know the job of the board is nearly impossible right now, and it's not something any of you anticipated at the beginning of 2020. I appreciate all of you striving to do what's best to keep our students, teachers, and staff safe in these unprecedented times. I know it hasn't come easy, and I'm proud of the way the district has moved forward this school year, and I hope to see that path continued as we move into 2021. The vaccine news is very promising, but as people gather during the winter holidays, especially as late as New Year's, there is likely to be high community spread early in the year. I urge you to enter the year with caution, staying in a remote model at least until we have a better understanding of what the post-holiday COVID spread might look like. We all want our kids back in school, but it needs to be done in the safest way possible for everyone involved. Number 30, Emily Woods. As a parent and someone who has given their heart and soul volunteering for this district, I am defeated. I am sad, I am angry. Revere has been in class 5 days a week. How is it that they can do it and we cannot? How is it that a group of highly intelligent and educated adults cannot come up with creative solutions for problems to do what is best for the kids? Every single study has stated that being in school is the safest place for them to be. Is it going to take yet another child in this district committing suicide for you to open your eyes? God forbid if that happens. If you as adults cannot come up with these solutions, then maybe these aren't the positions you should be in. All I keep hearing is soon. We have to go back to 5 days. Soon. Do it. These kids have been receiving a subpar education for 3 quarters. 31, Sarah Edwards. I asked the board to please consider the safety for all grade levels. The way we combat this from spreading in our schools after the holidays is keeping the kids in remote for at least 2 more weeks after the holidays. Thank you to all of the kids, parents, teachers, and staff that are working so hard to make this work. We are doing our part and we will get through this. 32 from Gazelle. With the number of COVID cases rising in our community, I would ask that you continue to put our students, staff, teachers, and families' safety and health as a priority. I think the district made a wise choice to stay remote after Thanksgiving, as we saw the numbers of COVID cases increase dramatically after the holiday. I hope you consider the impact of the upcoming holidays will have on increasing the numbers of COVID cases at the beginning of January on the proposed learning model for the remainder of the school year. And last but not least, from Hannah Alensik. Dear Superintendent Magyar and boards and members of the board, please consider all of the scientific evidence available to you as you consider a return to in-person school. Ohio currently ranks 3rd in the country for cases of per capita at 107.2 cases per 100,000 people. Cuyahoga County is currently at 117.7 per 100,000 people. Summit is at 109.9 per 100,000 people, since I know sometimes there has been reference that we shouldn't be compared to Cuyahoga since we are on the southern border. Things are worse now than they have been through this entire pandemic. Please do not let down our guard when it is needed most. Our healthcare workers need us to keep more people from falling ill as their capacity is strained and available staff has been reduced. While there is an amazing news from the scientific community regarding the vaccine's effectiveness, we are nowhere near the end of the trials, and trials have not even begun on vaccines for children. And then there's a list of sources that she has provided, web addresses and such. And that's it. My eyes hurt a little bit.
Nice job.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you, Deanna. We're going to move on then to item 8, superintendent's announcements. We have the reopening plan, and then we have the Polar Express live stream. So Ms. Magyar, would you please go over that reopening plan proposal?
Yeah, sure. So I just want to start off by saying that this plan that we have developed was developed in conjunction with feedback that we received from our teaching staff. We proposed this plan to them last Friday through their building principals. Each building had assembled a group of teachers to review the plan, go over the plan. They made some suggestions, and based on some of that feedback, the plan that you had originally seen last week has a couple minor changes. So some of these things might be new to you from the first time that it was talked about. Our proposed plan for the remainder of the school year, we want to give our families a roadmap. We've learned and we heard from first semester, the constant changing is problematic, especially to families who are trying to make arrangements for childcare and what have you. So we wanted to come up with a plan with the next 6 months, so look forward for 6 months. And so what we're proposing is a phase-in plan. And in phase 1, we're looking at phase 1 for the period from January 4th, which was the original date that we would to return to school after the holiday break, through January 18th, which is Martin Luther King Day, that the district would stay in remote learning for all grades pre-K to 12. And for this reason, we understand and we know, and we also know that we certainly can't mandate people to stay away from families and groups over the holidays. And we know that happened over Thanksgiving, and we're not in a position to mandate any of that. But in a proactive approach, we want to put our district on what I'm calling hyper remote. Currently, during this remote period, some teachers come into the building to choose to do their remote learning from their classrooms. Other buildings have teachers working from home for a variety of different reasons. And so during this period that I'm calling hyper remote, we want to keep everyone out of the buildings. And the reason we want to do that is for the exact reason that we heard in some of the comments, is that people are going to get together over the holidays, and there could be a spike in that. In a proactive measure, if we self-quarantine Brexville Broadview Heights City School District and keep people out for that quarantine period, we ensure a better chance for us when we do return in person, that we minimize the risk of spread. One of the issues that we have is not so much with the spread among the students that we see too much, but when we have to quarantine, if adults have been together, the idea of having to quarantine a number of adults. At the beginning, prior to Thanksgiving, one of the issues that we had is that we had an exposure at the middle school, which was going to cause us to have to quarantine 13 staff members. It's very difficult to staff the building. So when we look at, kind of a self-imposed quarantine, we can ensure that that families and adults and students that have gotten together over that holiday come back, they follow strict, quarantine protocols, stay at home, do their remote, that we can ensure that when we come back, we have a healthy staff and we have healthy students. What we don't want to do is come back to school for a week and then have to shut down again and go back remote because we have to quarantine so many people in a building that we can't sustain staffing within that building. And so by initiating this self-quarantine from January 4th to the 18th, we're going to, live through that exposure period. And, we can ensure more that we have minimized that exposure when we bring kids back. If you look at phase 2 would start on January 19th, which is a Tuesday, and run through January 29th. During this time, pre-K to 4, so all of our elementary schools will return to 5 days of in-person learning starting on January 19th. That will run through the end of the school year. Grades 5 through 12 will come back within a hybrid schedule for those 2 weeks. The reason we chose to propose this is that what we're seeing in our school data is that most of the cases that we are seeing in children are happening either at the middle school or high school. So we want to phase those kids back in again to minimize the need to have to close down again completely. So we'll phase those kids back in grades 5 through 12 in that hybrid schedule. Obviously, there is still always going to be an online option for families if they're not comfortable coming back 5 full days for in-person learning, or they're not comfortable coming back in a hybrid. There will be a remote option for those families to stay in remote learning. And then in phase 3, and this is where a change was, we looked at keeping the hybrid model for more so to 5 weeks. And after we talked through with some of our teacher feedback, it was determined that they felt that a 2-week hybrid schedule would be a good phase-in period. And then starting on February 1st, we would have everybody pre-K to 12 return to 5 full days of in-person learning. Again, always an option for families to stay remote or stay online if they choose to stay online. So the goal would be in this phase-in period to get all of our kids back to school, in-person learning, everyone by February 1st, but phase in starting with our elementary students we know are struggling the most with the remote learning and with the hybrid model, and just take that hybrid out, bring them back full days, and then phase in our middle school and high school, with the goal being that we return on February 1st and remain in person for the remainder of the school year. The idea would also be that there would not be a return to a hybrid, that if we needed to shut down a building because of staffing or because of exposure after that time, we would put the building into remote learning for whatever number of days that would need to be, so that we can maintain staffing. And then we would come back to in-person learning. So essentially, after that February 1st date, the hybrid model would be phased out of options for the rest of this school year. We do plan during that remote period, the hyper remote period, to not have anybody in districts except for some exceptions. We are still planning on providing food service during that time. So we're going to have some of our cafeteria workers come in to be able to provide that food and prep that food. Certainly, we need to make sure that our buildings are maintained and make sure that there's no water leaks or anything. So some of our custodial staff will be rotating in and out. But the idea is to keep everyone as much as possible at home during those 2 weeks, so that we can ensure a healthy and safe staff and healthy children when we return to 5-day in-person learning, without the threat of having to shut down our building soon after we would open it up again. Just some other considerations, and again, starting on January 4th, if parents, after looking at this model, decide that they want to switch their learning platforms, they can contact their building principal by January 8th to make that determination. This is kind of what we did when we were going back to 5 days before. Parents could contact their buildings directly. We will continue to have masks on at all times during the building, K through 12. All of our cleaning protocols will remain the same, and in the same that we're doing now, which we're doing a fantastic job of keeping our buildings clean and disinfected. We will continue to monitor the guidance from Cuyahoga County's Board of Health, and continue to report on our COVID cases as they become available, as we learn of that information. Let people know about if we're having cases in our schools, investigate outbreaks if we have any, and conduct our contact tracing, which we've done very well. The Cuyahoga County Board of Health has been happy with how we've been able to stay on top of that. Hand washing, again, there's still hand sanitizers in all the classrooms. None of that will change. Our state mandated standardized testing will proceed as scheduled right now. Again, there is legislation out there that is looking to put a waiver on that, but until we receive that, or until that legislation is passed, we have to plan as if we are going to give standardized tests. This is not a local decision. This is something that is state mandated, that is also federally mandated, that we provide benchmark testing. And until we have that waiver, and if you recall, it was waived last year, we are anticipating that will go through. But until that happens, we have to proceed as planned and according to the schedule of the state. As I said before, the meal program will still continue. We will still provide curbside meals for any student that needs it or that wants it. And this is not just for free and reduced lunch students. This is for any student that is registered in the Brecksville-Broadview Heights City School District is entitled to receive the meal program for breakfast and lunch. All sporting events to be determined, and that has to be, because as we move through the season, there are other mitigating factors that are determining whether or not we're able to play those sports activities, meaning that other schools have shut down or postponed their sporting team. So if we don't have anyone to play, we can't really play. We had a little bit of an issue with the swim team. We had a meet scheduled for tomorrow that has since been canceled because of not anything that we've done, but because of the pool and what is being allowed at the pool. So that is not something that's out of our control. So the TBD there is it's just going to be determined based on the situation or the teams that we're playing. All extracurricular activities for that hyper remote period would be postponed during that time. So anything that clubs that we're meeting, we'll postpone them for those 2 weeks. Again, the idea is to be proactive in that hyper remote period, so that we minimize exposure as much as possible.
Those 2 weeks no extracurricular, and then when we come back,
Well, so no, yes, when we come back, they can resume. The idea is to minimize exposure and just to give you a scenario right now. So during this remote period, we have about 70 kids that come into the high school for a variety of services. We have about 93 that come into the middle school. We have about 20 at each of the elementary schools that are coming in for a variety of services. Even with that limited exposure of staff being in and those limited number of students being in, we've still had cases over these 3 weeks. We've had at least 5 cases and then some needs to quarantine. So, you know, when we talk about this hyper remote, it's really, really important that if that's going to work, and we believe that it will, we need to minimize as much as people are coming together in our buildings and that becomes very important. Beekeepers, we are running, it will be determined during that hyper remote period as well, again, for the same reason. We are trying to be proactive and keep their exposure as minimal as possible so that we can ensure and have a better chance of keeping our kids in 5 days a week without having to shut down again because of exposure. Temperature checks, we have been doing them at school. When we come back to 5 days, we are asking parents to do those temperature checks at their home. Make sure that we do not send kids to school that are exhibiting any types of symptoms or any type of temperature. And to the extent possible, we will maintain our physical distancing. You know, we're not going to get to 6 feet in some of our spaces. We know that. We have masks, we have plastic barriers that we are putting up to, you know, keep kids as safe as possible and encouraging the hand washing, hand sanitizing as much as possible. No field trips or large group events. Kudos to our staff who's done a great job of this year trying to keep kids still having their orchestra concerts and their choir concerts and having them live streamed so that parents can still enjoy. We will still plan on having those events and doing them in the same manner. They won't, you know, we're trying to provide as many opportunities as we can, as safely as we can. And still, we're going to maintain our no school visitor policy through at least the first part of the year. We will review that come spring. If it looks that we can start having visitors and having events going on at school where we can get people together safely, we will look to and keep looking to revise that as well.
Joel, can you explain a little bit more in greater detail how the services for our most critical students are going to be delivered during that hyper remote time if they aren't on site?
So yes, so during that time, you know, we've got a couple schools of thought on that. And the first school of thought is that those services would be postponed for those 2 weeks. It's not to say that those students will not get those services. We're looking at ways that we can bring them in, maybe over spring break, if we have to bring them in over the summer to make sure that kids are getting the minutes that they're entitled to on their IEPs. But as I stated before, you know, we have kids right now during that remote period that are coming in and we're still having exposure. Our goal is to get these kids back in school in a safe manner and get our staff back in a safe manner. And the way we can do that is to be proactive and have this hyper remote period where we're limiting all exposure to people and kids so that we can ensure and guarantee that when we come back that we can stay in school. That is our goal. I don't want to see a situation where we bring kids back for a week, we haven't limited exposure, and we have to go back out for a week of remote because we have so many people out. That's what we're trying to avoid, big picture and long term. Mr. Dawson? Any questions?
Well, yeah, so I assume also that whether we move forward with this plan or we make any kind of adjustments to it, wherever we land, that any movement off of this plan would be driven by local data, meaning things going on in our district, like we have too many staff out and we can't staff a building, or we've had too many students, you know, out on quarantine or what have you. But that the driver to move off of whatever plan we settle on would be driven by locally what's happening in our district. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
Okay. So, I mean, I like a lot of the elements of the plan. The thing that I have the most concern with is the 2 weeks on the front end. I get the intent. I understand all of that. Fortunately, early signs seem to indicate that the second surge after Thanksgiving doesn't seem like it's going to happen. I mean, it's still early. And so, you know, we're at December 16th and we're trying to decide what's going to happen, you know, 3-4 weeks from now, and nobody really knows. So we talked earlier, and I just want to kind of clarify this. When you're pivoting from one educational model to the other, is it true that it's easier to pivot from an in-person model quickly to a remote versus the reverse?
Correct.
Okay, so, and we've experienced that unfortunately, where we've pivoted quickly from in-person back to remote. But it's very difficult to go the other way. So what I'm wondering is if we could keep the same plan, but move the phase 1 from 2 weeks to 1 week and plan on phase 2 starting January 11th. And today's December 16th, perhaps January 4th, when we know better, like what's going on with data, what's going on with our staff, what's going on in our community. If we feel a week out that the circumstances are not where we want them to be, we could fall back and say, let's push the start of phase 2 back to January 19th. But if we move it up to January 11th, it gives us flexibility so we can see what's going to happen in these next 3 weeks. And then if we need to, we can back off of it if, when we get farther down the road, we see, hey, you know what, we've got a lot of staff that are out, we've got a lot of students that are out, spread hasn't come down, what have you. We could make a judgment call. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the reason we picked the 19th, it was just a natural date because it's the start of second semester. So it just makes sense to do it that from just a timing issue. I did reach back out because after you and I had a conversation earlier, Mark, you asked me to get some feedback. So I sent it out to our administrative team. I sent it out to Bonnie, our union president, just to say, and to our central office team, who all had a say in this plan, and asked them, what would you think if we pushed it back to the 11th? You've got some levels that can handle it better. That could be done better at the high school than it can at the middle school, but it certainly cannot be done at the elementary school. If you recall, when we went to go back to 5-day in person, the 2 attempts that we tried earlier this year, there was some staffing implications and some redoing of class lists. And so we pressed pause because we didn't go to the 5 days on hiring. So to turn that around in a week's time, we're not going to be able to do that. Parents aren't even really required to give us notification until January 8th if they want to change the learning model. So if we don't know that, then we need that next week then to make any hiring adjustments or staffing adjustments we need to do at the elementary school to make that happen.
Okay, so it sounds like it could happen though at the high school and the middle school. At least, if we like that idea of coming back on the 11th, that, we could do it at those levels at the very least.
So from a logistics standpoint, it would work easier there. I did reach out to Bonnie and ask her about that. I think there is some concern about not having that full 2 weeks after the break. Our teachers they're not work days over Christmas break. So to have people to try to come in to get ready to do that, I know is not something that our teachers union is going to feel comfortable doing. In addition, they are looking forward to that 2 weeks for the same reason, to keep everyone healthy and safe. And so that was not something that they were in favor of doing, is coming back. They wanted to see the full 2 weeks into that schedule.
So respectfully, I'm elected to voice the community, and the teachers union has somebody to voice theirs. So
Sure.
I'm going to say January 11th. I would like to see us back. I know there was a communication set out by any OEA and NEA that suggested a 12-day period is what I believe it said. So it seems to me that January 11th is pretty close to that time period after New Year's Eve. I also have had a discussion with Independence Revere and where I'm employed, and they're going back 5 days. So right out of the gate. And so I'm not out of line in thinking that it would be reasonable that January 11th, who we can get in, that would be best educationally for our community. That has been my compass since August. And educationally, I think the longer, a week is huge. So when we just say it's trivial, I just taught a whole argument in 1 week. So, and I'm speaking for myself. I want to make that clear. I'm not speaking for our teachers union. So a week is significant. So the sooner we can get them back, I want to make sure, and if I have alignment, January 11th, I'd like to see that happen, quite frankly. Mrs. Kramer, your thoughts?
Well, I do have a question when you say that you want to see that happen. And just for I'm attending the meeting virtually. So if anybody's wondering where I'm speaking from. Are you asking that the middle school and the high school go back 5 days a week starting January 11th? Or do you think they go back in the hybrid starting January 11th?
In hybrid.
And then the rest of the plan that Mrs. Magyar just proposed would be the same?
It's
Okay.
really, Ellen, sorry, it's really just, it's the same plan. Just take phase 2 and put the start of phase 2 to January 11th.
Right, although we can't really do that with the elementary schools. I believe Mrs. Magyar just said we'd have to do the following week with the elementary schools.
Correct.
Okay,
I guess that's the question. You said it would be very difficult to do, but I guess, we have a little bit of runway now. If we pushed, is that something, I guess, what's holding that up because unfortunately the elementaries are the ones affected the most by being remote. I mean, it's the worst model for the elementary. So they're the ones most in need to get back into the building. So, do we have any creative ideas on how we could make that happen if we wanted to move forward with the 11th as the start?
I mean, unless the board wants to pay people to work over break. I mean, you've got 2 weeks of non-work days for staff to come in. So that means that the earliest they could come in would be January 4th to get their rooms ready. If you recall right now, the rooms are not set up to receive kids yet. They're received in a remote set, well, not even remotely, but in a hybrid. So there's room arrangements, there's planning that needs to be done to have kids come back. There are staffing rearrangements, there's room movements. There's a lot of moving parts that have to happen in those buildings before we could have those kids come back 5 days. So in theory, we wouldn't be able to have that staff come in until January 4th. And it kind of defeats the point of having a hyper remote if you're having the staff come back to set up a building to be ready to go on the 11th. It doesn't leave any time where you're minimizing exposure. So, and then in addition, we have to hire people. And so that's going to take, and while we have the authority to let those people start before a formal board meeting, to get people in to be able to do, and we did interview earlier when we had the fight, but some of those people have now gotten other positions or they're not available anymore. So we would have to start a hiring process all over again. And to turn that around in 5 days to try to open in the 11th is not going to be possible at the elementary level. I know it's also, not the wish of the middle school either that we don't take those 2 weeks. I think, there is some concern as we heard from our community too, of that exposure over the holidays and, what does that look like? And the last thing I want to do is open these buildings on, January 11th to turn around on the 19th and have to shut them down again because we didn't allow an appropriate amount of time to mitigate that exposure that people might have over the break.
Yeah, but I like Mark's idea. I mean, we revisit this as we get closer. We change the plan to the 11th. And if we see things are trending not in the direction they should, then we revert back to what we had said before. But at least I have heard our community, the same as the opposite side, I've heard them say, we want our children back. I don't feel like we're giving those people an option. They're not getting an option when we say that we're quarantining and doing remote, when I'm seeing 3 other districts that are going back 5 days. So public school is a right, and we have a fiduciary responsibility to give these people an education that is equitable and good. And if other people don't agree with that's fine, but I don't feel like we're giving these people a choice when I am forcing them into quarantine. This is their parental decision. Okay, so it's not ours. So I want to get those kids in on the 11th, whoever we can make all these reasons why we can't do something. We're really good at that a lot, but I would like to hear why we can. How can we do it? So.
I was just mentioning, Craig, it might be helpful to put that camera on your
Oh,
screen
sorry.
so everybody can see what we're talking about versus just the agenda.
So,
Gotcha.
so how can, I heard Mark ask that question. It seems like there's no option to get everybody back on the
Well, I guess
11th.
the first question needs to be, are we in consensus that at the date change, like, do we need to go down the path to have a discussion about the date change? Are we all in consensus in that capacity?
Well, we're exploring, is it an option,
Right.
I guess. And so, we could check with everybody right now to see, do we want to continue the conversation? Do we have 3 board members who are interested in pursuing this conversation about trying to be a little more aggressive in getting our students back in the building? And then if we have 3, then we can continue the conversation. And if we don't, we can stop the conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm in favor of continuing.
I am as well.
I am as well. I guess I just would like to say, I am fine with both what Joelle is saying, and I'm sorry, with Mrs. Magyar is saying and what Mrs. Mack is saying. The only difference seems to be the start date, when it comes right down to it. And if I'm want to accept Mrs. Magyar's representations about the difficulties of doing that with the elementary kids. And I am all in favor of this hyper remote period so that we can get this second semester off to a good start. So if we don't want anybody, mingling in the buildings from January 4th through the 8th, then I think we need to just say, let's start the K through 4 kids 5 days a week after that Martin Luther King Day. So we could start the older kids earlier than that, but start the younger kids. I'm fully on board with keep everybody home for the week after New Year's. And we can't do that if we're going to be having to interview people and set up classrooms, etc.
Is that feasible?
My question is we're still going to have that week to end up interviewing people again, right? I mean, postponing it for a week doesn't change it.
We still have to go through our hiring process, yes. But if you're saying that the elementary stays and that it doesn't start until after January 19th, it gives us that time then at the elementary buildings to be able to do that, to keep them remote. But I worry, I'm not saying it's not feasible. I just worry that if we come back on the 11th in our middle school and high school, we are going to be shutting down our middle school and high school sooner than later because we're not allowing the appropriate amount of time to mitigate the exposure. That is my concern.
Where'd you get the mitigation, that's not the proper time for mitigation?
Because 14 days. So if I take 14 days from New Year's Day, which is a Friday this year, people are probably staying over the weekend. So
Right.
even from that, the 3rd, 14 days takes you to the 17th of January of the last time somebody might be
There's
exposed.
a lot of assumptions built in that, and that
Sure.
number I have heard also coming down to 10. So there's a lot of people who are debating that. Again, not a scientist, don't know that. Educational expert is what I am. And based on that, I would say January 11th is a fair amount of time from what I've seen all over the place, and people are all over the place. January 11th is doable. And I'm not gonna, other than that, if parents don't feel comfortable, we have the remote, but I want to give them a choice.
Well, I guess I want to remind everyone what I was suggesting too was taking a checkpoint on January 4th. So now
How are we going to know that? That's the first day back. How are we going to assess where teachers are, where kids are? That's the first day after break. Like how do you suggest that we take that temperature check?
Well, I would assume that on January 4th, we will know how many of our staff are COVID positive.
Not necessarily. If we have.
Tested COVID positive, aren't they obligated to tell us on January 4th, time to come back to work, are you COVID positive? We're not going to know that?
We may not, but that doesn't mean that those teachers still haven't been exposed or our staff hasn't been exposed over that period of
I
time.
understand everybody could be exposed.
Correct.
I'm asking about what can we learn? What will we know on January 4th? So if somebody was exposed and they need to quarantine, I'm talking our staff now, I'm assuming they would be obligated to tell us either I have COVID or I was exposed and I need to quarantine. And if they're not in one of those 2 groups, they're eligible to come in, correct?
We weren't going to have them come in on the 4th anyway. So if they were exposed, they wouldn't necessarily have to share because they're not coming into the building.
Okay, so if we ask them, can you share with us on January 4th what your status is? Do we think most of our teachers and staff would comply and willingly share whether or not they are in a healthy situation or a compromised situation?
Well, I think professionally, if we asked our staff, they would be professional and they would tell us, but I don't know if that's the end all be all, because if they tested positive on Sunday, January 3rd, that's a different amount of time that they have to be out as opposed to they tested positive on December 22nd. So like, I don't know how much better information we're going to have on January 4th than we would have, 2 weeks later. And then being able to actually control that mitigation or control that exposure amount of time, on our end, to do our part, to be proactive and control that so that we don't have that, when were you exposed? Was it December? Was it January 1st or what have you? To build that into the calendar. So then you can say, okay, we've built in 14 days. So even if you were exposed up to January 3rd, we know that you worked through that quarantine time frame, that you come back, you've got a higher percentage of chance that you're coming back healthier than if you were coming back on the 4th or the 11th.
I understand. Local data would be just one piece of the puzzle on trying to figure out what does the world look like January 4th and what does our corner of the world look like. So we have anecdotal data now that suggests there may not have been a second surge from Thanksgiving. In the coming weeks, we will know for sure whether there was a surge from Thanksgiving or perhaps people started taking all of the precautions that have been amplified. So we're also going to start seeing the numbers everywhere and locally on whether they're continue to go up or they're starting to trend down. So what I'm saying is collectively on January 4th, or pick some other date around there, we will have a better sense of, is opening January 11th something that we think we can pull off safely without compromising the rest of our plan, or does it not look good, right? You could either have data that makes it clear, like, wow, the numbers just came down like crazy. There was no surge and everything. It's like, that's a go. Or they could be skyrocketing. No, it's not a go. Or it could be a gray area, which is a judgment call. But what I'm saying is that if we put in the plan to say, let's try to, be creative and shoot for January 11th, we can always, reassess and say, in the coming weeks and say, what, whether it's January 4th, January 3rd, January 5th, January 6th, January 7th, pick a date, right? We just talked about how quick we can pivot, and we already have multiple times from an in-person model back to a remote. So I threw out January 4th. What about January 7th? What about January 8th? What about January 9th? What about that Friday? I mean, we have pivoted very quickly and given parents 5. I know that's not ideal. I know it would be great to lock in a plan and we'd be all done. But we're trying to say, how quickly can we go to get kids back in school? And we heard all of those comments, and there's many more that are out there, there's people on both sides. I get that. But for the people who have kids that are struggling, I mean, a week makes a difference, especially at this elementary stage. So for instance, you mentioned earlier that, we might, there might be a cost issue. We might have to bring, teachers in if we wanted to shoot for that. Let's have that conversation. I'm willing to put money on the table to make it happen. So we can say, can we be creative? So maybe it's not January 4th. I'm looking at the calendar. January 8th is a Friday. January 7th is Thursday. How about January 8th? We take a checkpoint. We take the temperature of our staff and our buildings, and we say, look, on January 8th, we're going to tell you whether or not we're coming back January 11th or not. Now we got a 3-day leeway to say, now we got even more data. So I'm just saying, and I have been, fairly consistent in trying to be aggressive in getting our students back in the buildings, because I'm of the belief that this remote learning and hybrid learning has been far more detrimental to our students than COVID ever will be. And that's why I push so hard to get them back in the buildings.
I agree with Mark in that the kids ought to be back in the buildings as soon as possible. But I also agree with the data that shows that 14 days is what you need of quarantine after you're exposed to COVID. And the quickest we could get our kids back into school, according to the math, is January 3rd plus 14. So it's January 17th. I don't see how we can go back after a week without that knowledge. I don't believe that for the safety of our kids, and Mark is as consistent as you've been, I've been consistent too. And I'm staying with the safety. I want to get the kids back in school full time. I'm not going to do it without them being safe.
I don't think there's anyone sitting in this room that does not want kids back in school 5 days. We all are after the same goal. There is not one person in here that doesn't want to see our kids back. You know, we've been advocating for that since day one. You know, our plan originally, if you recall, was tied to the color map, and the color we were in at the beginning of the year would have had our kids back 5 days. So, you know, I don't want to talk about the fact that nobody in this room doesn't want kids back. We had a plan to have kids back, and we pulled back from that. What I'm saying right now is, yes, we are looking at local. I'm trying to be proactive to get our kids in school and keep them in school. Our parents deserve that. Our kids need that. And this roller coaster of going back and forth constantly is not fair to our kids. It's not good for anybody's mental health, adults or kids. So while I understand, and it's 1 week, we owe this community a plan, and a plan that we stick to. And that plan lays out dates, it lays out, and we said hybrid's going away. So you have options, parents. If you're not comfortable with this model or these phase-ins, you've got an option to stay remote or come into school. But we've got to do it in a way that we can ensure that once we get these kids in school, they stay in school. And that's what this plan does.
But with all due respect, you can't guarantee, there's only one
No.
educational model that you can guarantee that we won't change. That's remote. Stay home and you won't be exposed, and we can guarantee that we can deliver that model all the way through June. Anything else that has an in-person component, we can't guarantee anything. We'd love to. Now we're just getting back into, hey, it's a risk trade-off, okay? We can delay longer, which will increase our chances of not having to pull back, but you sacrifice in-person education time. Or we can be more aggressive and hope that we can make it. And we have districts around us like Revere, like Independence, and like a lot of the private schools and the Catholic schools that have been doing 5-day consistently, you know, for almost the beginning. And so what's the right answer? You know, that's why we're having this conversation. That's why we're having this debate. I think we're all on the same page. It's a question of how aggressive do we want to be in getting kids back in school, you know, for in-person education, and how much do we want to pump the brakes and try to play the COVID balancing, like, well, let's not get them exposed. And, you know, obviously this board is a reflection of the community. We're divided. We don't all agree. You know, some want to go faster, some want to go slower. We all have the same goal in mind, is let's keep everybody safe, but, you know, let's all recognize that this isn't a choice between a safe choice and a not safe choice. Neither choice is safe, right? Because we're hearing about all the social emotional impacts, suicide rates skyrocketing for young people. So keeping them home may save them from COVID, but it doesn't save them from all the other ramifications of being isolated and being remote. So there isn't a truly safe option that we have. We've got, you know, not good, not good. What do we want to pick?
I agree, there isn't a really safe option, but I really do believe that, that the plan that we've been given gives these kids a chance to go back to school and stay in school better than if we rush it
And
and have to shut down.
And I respect that, but that's what you believe. And then we have our, you know, like our thoughts too, and it sounds like the majority, that's what they want, January 11th. That's what, you know, that's what I've heard. I'd like to move on to phase 2. I honestly, I want to see everybody back 5 days. I'm not sure why, and I have heard the different reasons, but we're going to talk about the spread at the high school. We're going to throw that out again. I think that's going to continue on happening for the remainder of this year. People are going to choose to get vaccines or not, but I would like to see everybody back in school on January 19th, 5 days. And I'm looking at the districts around us. They are doing that. the private schools are doing that. Okay, so given all the options, we can't guarantee that people are going to be safe. We're going to do our best, but that's the parental choice. And now I'm giving parents choice by getting kids back 5 days. Those children are very much at risk. Okay, their mental states they're falling apart, the older kids, and I'm going to be their voice. So I understand K-4. That's horrifically difficult. I watch my colleagues every day, but I can tell you what I see, the emotional part, it's awful. I'm sobbing, crying on my Zooms when everybody's left. So I'm going to be their voice. These children deserve to be back, and we can do the best. We will do everything in our power to keep everybody safe, but they should be back as well in phase 2, 5 days.
Sorry, but I just want to circle back because I guess I just want to clarify what we decided about January 11th. I know we talked about going back January 11th, and then there was the elementary, which was in flux, which is, can we bring the elementary back or not? And so we were talking about, you know, what would it take to bring elementary back on January 11th? And I guess I'm not sure if we landed on a final position. So if we wanted to move forward with trying to come back January 11th, you know, what would we need to do to make that happen for the elementaries? Is that something that we could make happen if we really wanted to make happen?
No. I mean, not with 2 weeks of where we don't have people working, unless we're willing to bring them in, and then they have to be willing to do that because they're non-work days for our teachers. So they do not technically have to be back to work until January 4th, and neither do our principals for that matter. So that work of hiring and getting those rooms ready to receive kids cannot happen in 5 days and then have them ready to go on the 11th.
And they only have 2 days, right? Left, 3 days left, 2 days left. Because they're done working on Friday, right? Teachers?
Yes.
Teachers last day.
What are they, I'm sorry, but what are they actually doing in the rooms? What's the prep that's needed to prepare for?
Well, first of all, the rooms are only set up to receive half the classes. So you've got rooms that need to be moved. You've got teachers right now that are teaching the kids virtually from their rooms. But now when we bring kids back, we might have to split sections. So we have to set those rooms up and relocate teachers that are working virtually. So there's a lot of logistics that obviously have been planned for because we've done, you know, we've planned to come back twice, but we never pulled the trigger on it. So while there are plans done, now you're in a 5-day week where you've got to move rooms, you've got to move furniture, you've got to rearrange, and you're not giving enough time for parents because some classes need to be readjusted. Because if we have a surge of parents that want to come back and we don't know about that till the 8th, we've got to figure out, okay, where do we need teachers? We know right now where we have a surge if people come back, but if people change their minds now between when we asked the last time and asking now, that's going to change numbers. And so we need to have time to figure all of that out, to redo class lists if need be. You know, there was concerns we heard from our online parents where, you know, we said if we were coming back, parents were concerned that they were going to have to change teachers. We don't want to do that. Our online kids are our families too, and there's no reason that we need to change those teachers. So if we have an influx that comes in, we have to find a room, hire a teacher, set that room up to receive kids in those classrooms, and then determine if there is an overload, do we have to collapse another type of space to make room for another classroom? That just takes time to do. And with people changing their minds, you know, on learning platforms, our principals need time to plan that out. So it can't happen on the 11th.
My preference would be to keep the K-5 kids coming back after the Martin Luther King Day holiday and do it the 5 days a week, just as Joelle proposed.
I mean K-4, is that correct?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
So does that mean we could bring back 5 through 12 on the 11th, or are you saying we can't bring anybody back
On the 11th?
on the 11th?
Well, I mean, there's still, if we're bringing them back in hybrid and not trying to bring them back 5 days, I mean, in theory, those rooms are already set up because that's what we were doing prior to the break. I mean, yes, there's going to need time for teachers to plan, but I mean, that in theory could be done a little bit easier at the middle school and the high school than it can at the elementary school, because you're not necessarily in a position unless the parents come to the middle school and high school, and now all of a sudden you have an influx of people that want to change their learning platforms, and then it might require a little bit more logistics to plan what that might look like.
And I'm gonna jump in here. I have to say, I have a high schooler, as most of you know. I want to keep the high schoolers in a hybrid as Joelle proposed until later in January, because that we had so many cases in November. I mean, it was just, I just think keeping the older kids in a hybrid until the end of the month makes sense. It was just getting so challenging. You know, I mean, no, there were kids on the robotics team quarantined. And I mean, I know there were not kids in the elementary school. So I just don't see bringing the old, with the numbers where they are right now. I want these kids back in school. I'm fully cognizant of all the shortcomings of the current learning models. I'm not going to repeat that, but the back and forth is just, so I'm not in favor of the high school or the older kids going back in 5 days a week, starting the 11th. I think we should hold that off until the date Mrs. Magyar
No,
proposed.
and nor was I. I'm not, I would
Okay.
like to see them in phase 2, go back with the other children 5 days.
But we're
Okay.
talking about January 11th,
She-
pushing.
No, I
phase
know,
two
she
back.
said, oh, okay, go ahead. I thought she said that we would do 5 days.
Well, what we talked about is if we wanted to go forward with moving phase 2 up to January 11th, we could only accommodate 5th through 12th grade.
Right.
That the elementaries have logistical challenges that would prohibit us from bringing them back. So, if we wanted to move forward with a January 11th phase 2 start for 5 through 12, that would be our only option.
I was looking at phase 1 and we're modifying that, and that's where I was seeing it, and then switching phase 2 to stay the same, except to include 5 days.
Yeah, I mean, if we shortened phase 1, it elongates phase 2 an extra week. We're basically pushing, if we decide to do that, we would push a week from phase 1 into phase 2. Yeah, and my biggest concern again was it's the kindergarten to 4, and we're saying we can't get them in the building. And so, that's where,
They're still struggling. with-
well, if we can't get them in now, we can bring the other ones in, but
Let's not put importance on, let's not say one's more important than the other. All of them are important. And I understand the struggles are all different, is what I guess I want to show you. They're different. And if she is telling us that she can accommodate 5 through 12 because it has a lot of ease, then I think we should take that and then allow them the time that she's our educational leader. We should allow them the time that she says that they need, Mrs. Magyar,
so.
to get that in place.
So if we make that modification to this plan to say we are going to plan to bring back 5 through 12 on January 11th, how late can you take until January 8th to take the temperature of what's going on? Or do you think you need more runway? How much runway do you need? Because we've pivoted quickly in the past.
We're gonna have to push that date up because, I mean, the 8th is a Friday. You want us to pivot then on Monday to change that. And our middle school and high school will need a day or two to adjust those numbers and figure out if, and busing, I mean, there's,
Right.
There's a whole, but you're talking grades 5 through 12 on January 11th to come back in hybrid.
Yes.
Right. I'm saying the pivot would be to switch to remote, right? We would, if we plan for January 11th for 5 to 12 to be coming back in person, at what's the drop dead point that you would want to say we're switching to remote because circumstances are, the longer you have, the more data you'll have to see what's going on.
Well, sure, but they'll already be in remote that first week. So we'll know, we don't need to pivot to remote because we'll be in remote January 4th through the 8th.
No, but if we have the plan to come back in person January 11th,
I understand.
if we're going to switch, if we're going to pull back from that on January 11th and say, January 11th, we're not going to go in person, we're going to switch to remote.
You're not switching, you're staying, staying in remote because
Stay-
you're in,
okay,
so we don't need,
stay in remote, but you've got to make that call before January 11th.
well, sure, but we've made that call when we've had to put buildings on remote, you know, because of quarantine. We've made that call the night before. Like I said, it's easier to switch to go to remote. So if we're already in remote, it would, you know, it could be a message on Friday looking at numbers and saying, hey, we're not coming back and hybrid on Monday. I mean, so you don't need runway time to go to stay that way.
So what I'm saying is, so then what it sounds like is that you could have Friday, January 8th in the afternoon, a 4 o'clock email could go out saying, we're staying in remote come Monday, or we're going to go with the plan and we're going to be back in person Monday. Basically, you could have your data points you could be using to drive your decision could be Friday afternoon, January 8th,
Yes.
which would give you more data to decide versus January 4th. It gives you a whole nother 5 days of data that you'll be able to ascertain whether it makes sense to continue with coming back January 11th or staying remote.
Okay.
I mean, I just want to make sure we're on the same page because we talked through a lot of things. So I want to, you know, the idea is that, and Ellen, chime in if you will, but I think you were in favor with Kathleen and I for 5th through 12th of trying to bring them back in hybrid on January 11th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what we were saying is, we don't know today. I mean, today, you know, the numbers are bad right now, but they're trending in hopefully in a better direction. You'll know a lot more, you know, 3 to 4 weeks from now. So you're going to have a decision point to say, are we going to follow through with that plan on January 11th to bring back 5th through 12th in person in hybrid? And the decision point, if you wait till January 8th, you'll have the most current relevant data possible to make that decision.
Yes.
Okay. So I think we have some alignment on this, which would be a modification to this plan would be for 5th through 12th, phase 2, we would be starting January 11th. And we will review data right prior to January 11th to see, can we still make that happen or is it not feasible?
So then I asked the question, if this is dynamic, then why can't we consider 5 days, you know, for our students to phase in a 5 through 12? If this is a dynamic situation where we could make that decision, why isn't that an option? That's all. Still
Well,
keeping them in the worst model we have.
The plan has hybrid for grades 5 to 12 from January 19th to 29th. We're talking about expanding that to January 11th to the 29th.
Right.
And you're suggesting that what, January 11th, we don't come back hybrid, we come back full on five
No, I'm
days in person?
wondering if January 11th, we come back hybrid, like a phase in, and then those high schoolers transition, not high schoolers, 5 through 12 transition on the 19th to full day. Like the K through 4 do.
Well, Ellen mentioned that she wasn't in support of that. I'm not in support of that too. I think that's a little too aggressive. I think we need to get our footing back in hybrid and see where we're at. So I'm not sure if that idea has traction.
Okay. I think if we're going to take this approach where we look at things, you know, and less larger chunks and smaller chunks, I think that we owe it to I know we owe it to the public to try and get those students back. And if things were trending well, then what, you know, and we would know that, then why wouldn't we try to get those students back in 5 days as well?
Well,
And
the one
that's
thing that
what
we've
I'm
said all
asking.
along is that it's subject to change.
Yeah,
I mean, if the week of the 11th, everything goes well and we don't have any problems, I mean, I'd be willing to talk about it, but right now, I prefer the plan as it is, and we're going to make the one change to come back on the 11th. again, I prefer the plan the way it is.
And I'd like to leave it open to talk about. I'd like to see where we're at on that
We've done
day.
that, we've done
Yes.
that all the way through.
Well,
I don't see anything changing on that.
I agree, but when we set out a plan and our parents see it, they see it as solid. We have lots of parents leaving our district because we're not providing them full day. Okay?
Mhm,
We've
sure.
had over 200 parents, I believe, was the last time to look at the numbers, and it's going upward.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm hopeful, we see it, we have this plan, but we will tell them, here's what we're doing right now, okay? But this is subject to change. And the goal is to get everybody back 5 days. And if we have data that supports that, then let's open that back up again.
That's what we've
discussion.
done all along, Kathleen.
I understand. I'm trying to explain to the public though, when you do this, this sends out a message
Mhm.
to them that in my mind, some of these parents, there's no hope. And I don't want that. I don't want that message there. I want to let them know there is hope. There is a hope that we can have this discussion and maybe we find ourselves in a better spot at that time, at that point in time. And that we're going to do the hybrid, but maybe 5 days is an option for our high schoolers sooner rather than later.
I think every option is still on the table.
Okay. All right, well, there's no reason to keep going on and on since I don't have even a majority, so, all right. Thank you.
I'm sorry, and I apologize to continue this. Do we have clear direction? Because I feel like I having sort of not a stake in the ground as far as I err with Fred on, I like this plan. I think this is responsible. I think this accounts for quarantining post-holiday activity. I don't know, did we reach a direction here?
Yeah, the majority said January 11th.
Okay, I just,
5 through 12 would
Right.
be coming back in a hybrid. Is that correct?
Well,
And
right, so just
We just
take the
moved it
plan,
up.
take the plan that's proposed, and the
Right.
only change to it is for grades 5 to 12, instead of coming back in hybrid on January 19th, they will come back on January 11th.
Okay.
But with the caveat that Joelle will, January 8th, take a look at all the data, right? And make a determination on whether it still makes sense to do that. And there could be conversations with board members too at that time, what have you. I mean, we need to see, because we're December 16th right now. So what is the world going to look like on January 8th, and what is our corner of it going to look like? You know, are we, if you have known high numbers of staff that are under quarantine and COVID, then January 11th is not practical. You know, if these spread rates go up, you know, if we're seeing spikes up from Christmas and whatnot, and more spread in the community, pull the plug, fall back, right? And so it's a judgment call, just like all of this is going to be a judgment call. So, you know, the change is going to be this, basically it's this plan, just phase 2 for grades 5 to 12, push it up 1 week to January 11th.
Subject to change. There we go.
Which again, to Fred's point, the whole thing's subject to change.
Yeah,
Other than
clear as
the,
mud.
other than the remote part. I mean, we can lock in on the remote part, but
Yeah, for that one part.
Well, as long as COVID drives the boat.
for just passengers.
Okay, item B, if we're okay to move on with this. Item B, Polar Express live stream.
Yeah, I just want to remind our community and invite you to join us and grab a cup of hot chocolate. I will be live streaming a reading of the Polar Express tomorrow at 2 o'clock. It's just something that, you know, we typically have done a holiday video in the past, and unfortunately, it's not going to be too cute if there's no kids in it. So we're going to do a reading of the Polar Express. We have pictures for the kids to follow along, and they can read along with us. It shouldn't last more than 20 minutes. And if I can get Bob, our tech director, to load a couple of extra things, we might have a couple of surprises of some other things that you might see during that live stream. So I'm pretty excited about it. I will be in my PJs as well, because that's what you do on the Polar Express. And so we look forward to that. And just so I hope all of you can tune in for just 20 minutes of just a holiday tradition we hope to continue here. So
Have teachers been made aware of the timing of this?
They have, and
Okay,
they've
great.
been sent the link as well. So I
Awesome.
know some of our teachers plan to let the kids watch it. We have some, and it will be recorded. Some teachers are having the kids watch it on Friday, just depending on what they had already had. So it'll be available on our YouTube channel for anyone to watch. And I'd like to, last announcement, just wish all of our families happy holidays and stay safe over break. We miss your kids and we miss you, and we look forward to seeing them in the new year.
Item 9, treasurer announcements. Any announcements?
Well, I did make a quick update. We're not going to talk about this in much detail, but I did upload a kind of like an updated priority plan based on some of the stuff we've talked about. So, and what I'm planning to do is we're going to schedule another PI meeting here in the next couple of weeks because we have this HVAC proposal and LED lighting proposal coming up. So we kind of want to work, at committee level with that. So this is I think it's exciting news. We think we can make this work, where we would basically take off $850,000 in the roofing project, which would leave us with $500,000 that's left. Now, granted, we may identify more of those roofs as time goes, but for right now, in terms of updating what the board has been using for a long time, this is what we have. The middle school security vestibule will be complete here shortly. So they're just doing punch list items. So that comes off the list. And then the other thing we would be getting rid of basically is that HVAC mechanical system, DDC controls. Actually, we were able to accomplish a lot more than that. It's about $2.5 million is the total project roughly. So that would be complete hopefully this summer. We're looking at getting some final engineering. And again, we'll work through committee with that to get the other board members and the other committee members up to speed. That would be completed this summer. So we do have some runway, but we do need some decisions to be made so that can all be completed. So it'll be a very, very busy summer here at BBHCSD. And then I kind of just renumbered this, and we'll again work in committee to see where this would go. Some of these projects we would do at the same time. So even if it's like there's two numbers, because we're starting to work with smaller amounts, our next step is going to be to put these and put them on a docket to get them. Once we get closer to the building project and what money is left, we can start to expedite these to see where we're at financially more with the building, in addition to what we have coming off the list in fiscal 22 and fiscal 23 with our regular PI money. But because we're getting rid of some of these big ticket items, I think we can start working through some other projects at a faster pace. And then like that high school plumbing, that may be something we break up into 2 or 3 pieces just to start the project and break it up into smaller pieces so we can address some of those smaller items like the track and the tennis courts and whatnot. So we're going to try to do a holistic approach, work through committee, and get these permanent improvement items off the docket as quick as possible.
Craig, I have a quick question. That on the chart you have at the very top, the high school, middle school roof replacement repair, but this highlighted box is not. What is the highlighted box? Why is it underneath?
Well, that's just, I was trying to figure out how to demonstrate. That's the $850,000 that we've authorized for bid for this summer. So it's the 1.3 minus the 850. Because we're going to do 850,000 this summer. We just went out to bid for that, or we're going out to bid for that. So
Okay.
This is what the remaining left of priority would be.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
That's it for me.
Okay. Item 10, other board business, election of president pro tem for organizational meeting. May I have a motion? January 6, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
So discussion?
We need a person.
Discussion.
Do you want to be pro tem?
Somebody. What's your appointment?
How about Fred? You want to be?
You want to appoint? Okay,
Sure.
okay, Fred. Fred Peterson. You got this, Fred.
That was a real long discussion.
I think you were last year.
I did? I
Yeah,
was?
or this year, it's January.
That's
This
right, I
year.
was. I was this
Shoulder
this
up
year.
for you.
That used to be
I
you.
mean, I'm an expert at it.
There you go.
You're a veteran, Fred. We
You're
want to
better.
stick with the experienced hand.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes. Item C, electronic meeting resolution pursuant to House Bill 404. Roll call. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Sorry. Okay.
This is just House Bill 404 permitted the holding of meetings virtually through June of 2021. And so it was just recommended that our board passes a resolution to allow that should you feel it necessary to continue virtual meetings.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman.
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Item E, Neola policy update, second reading and adoption. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
This is the policy on social media that you had requested. We add to our list of policies.
Roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes. Item 11, superintendent's consent agenda. We have certified recommendations, classified recommendations, supplemental recommendations, and approval of superintendent's consent agenda. I have a motion.
So
So
moved.
second.
Any questions on any of the recommendations?
I just want to make sure and do a double check real quick. I don't see any conflict here. Nope. Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Treasurer's consent agenda. A, financial report. B, authorized treasurer CFO to request tax advances. C, unified talent contract. D, transfer request. E, minutes. F, approval of treasurer's consent agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so in the financial report, there it is. So here's the overall picture. We are $324,000 favorable, $162,000 unfavorable. Overall impact would be 162 to the positive. When we look down here, this is like our bottom line at the end of the year, what they project. So this is that flow. This does fluctuate based as we put the actuals together. So it's not super far off from where we are projecting in the forecast. And again, this will just continue to kind of just monitor, but nothing really stood out too far. When it comes to, this was the all other revenue. So what happened here was this was that first installment of workman's comp. That's why we see a large increase in all other revenue for the month. I was like, let me move this over here. And so when we compare the revenue received through November compared to the prior year, we are under, which we've talked about the reasons why. The state revenue piece is due to some of the cuts because it's comparing to last year. All of the revenue is all day kindergarten. It's pay to participate, a host of other things. We have delayed for families the pay to participate fees, just so we can get a better picture of COVIDs without having to do refunds. So those should be going out for winter sports soon, but we've been holding off just so we don't have to do a refund situation like we did last year because it's very, very time consuming for the department. This is the overall picture of the revenue. So it's pretty close to the actual forecast. Again, we'll see each month as this goes. So we're just trying to see what happens in this crazy world of COVID. On the expenditure side, we are holding very, very good. Our actual expenses for the month was up only $2,900 compared to last year. So that's very good considering there's been increases in salaries and benefits. So as much as we've lost, I think the big picture of all of this is lost as a district in revenue. We've done a really good job of controlling our expenditures. We're down $1.1 million over the same period than the previous year. So we've done that. We've seen savings in purchase services, all other expenditures, and then some in salaries and benefits. We have had some retirements, et cetera, and we're going to start to see some of those project out throughout the rest of the year. So unfavorable though in terms of the comparison to the forecast right now. And again, this will still fluctuate. We're down in salaries, down in purchase services, but all other expenditures are considered up just as it compares to the forecast. And then here's our total in terms of expenditures for the projection at the end of the school year. But again, this is more of a flowing report that will change as our actuals get kind of factored in. The request for tax advances, this has been done at the organizational meeting. The county auditor requests that this is done in December. So we're just kind of moving this up into this month. The Unified Talent contract, I did share this. This is an add-on module to the software system to basically make the HR department completely paperless, which is a huge endeavor, which we're kind of super excited about. The transfer request, we're moving some of that money to get into the PI fund so that we can get some of those projects accomplished from some of our BWC rebate money. The minutes that are here and the just general, if anyone has any questions, let me know.
So did we get on that contract, Unified Talent contract, did we get some movement on price on that?
We did. I did find out too, as much as before I knew, because they were trying to get a good deal, is that we have a similar size district that is using the same software that's about $6,000 more. So I won't say who that is, but similar size district does not have the same kind of rate that we did. So we're pretty happy with the price of it.
Good.
Roll call.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Item 13, closing items. We have A, announcements, B, adjournment. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any announcements?
You know what, I don't have an announcement, but I have a question that I probably should have brought up earlier, and I think some other board members may have been approached about this, but we had talked about something like this way back in August, probably with Mr. Code, some improvements that were being made to the buildings relating to air quality. And, fast forward 4 months and there's, more data out there that COVID transmission is not, it's not transmitted on surfaces quite as much as they thought. It's really the air. So I'm wondering if in the time that we have now, I know that there's some other districts who have invested in some fairly inexpensive ways to improve their air quality for the students in their buildings. I'm just wondering if, that might be, it now might be a time to maybe look into that a little bit again.
We've already purchased 12 of them. They're on their way if they're not here already.
Oh, great. Okay. What was purchased, Joelle, or Mrs. Magyar?
Fires for all the buildings that cover
Okay.
a certain amount of square footage. So we bought, multiple ones for buildings. We can put them in areas to keep the airflow purified as the day goes on. So they will be placed strategically in the buildings to cover all the air and purify it throughout the course of the day.
Great. Okay.
Oh, that's a happy note. Okay.
Yeah.
Greg,
Somebody's
if you want
happy.
to click on the announcements, then Kathleen could read the announcement.
Oh, there you go.
The organizational meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for Wednesday, January 6, 2021 at 5:00 p.m. at the Education Center. So that's when we will be organizing ourselves. Tune in. Okay, roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Yes.